Somewhere over the Pacific, in the space between two coastlines, two air forces are quietly rehearsing a war that neither side says out loud it wants. One flies jets first designed during the Cold War and still refuses to retire them. The other has rolled out more stealth aircraft in the last 5 years than most nations build in a century. Numbers alone will not tell you who actually wins. A fighter jet is never just a shape in the sky. It is a decade of engineering decisions, a story of engines that worked and engines that quietly failed, of programs canceled halfway and programs rushed into service before anyone was ready. Tonight, we go aircraft by aircraft, bomber by bomber, drone by drone, through the machines that make up the two most powerful air forces on the planet. Some of these have flown in real combat. Others have never even been photographed clearly. All of them matter. Let's start where the sky itself first became contested. Chapter 1. Stealth Fighters, the Invisible Duel. Start with the aircraft that opened the entire era of stealth air combat. The F-22 Raptor entered service on the 15th of December, 2005, and for over a decade it had no true rival anywhere on the planet. It can supercruise, which means flying faster than sound without ever lighting the afterburner, holding above Mach 1.5 on dry thrust alone, a trick almost no other fighter in the world can manage even today. Its absolute top speed touches Mach 2.25, powered by twin F-119 engines, with thrust vectoring nozzles that let it point its nose at angles that would tear most other jets apart. But here is the strange part of the story. Lockheed Martin stopped building it in 2011, after only 187 airframes. And the reason was political, not technical. Congress simply decided the Cold War threat it was designed for had disappeared. Today, somewhere between 130 and 150 combat-ready Raptors remain, guarded jealously, upgraded quietly, and never exported. Not even to America's closest allies. Not once in 20 years. Congress even wrote a law banning its export by name, worried that its stealth coatings and sensor fusion might one day leak into the wrong hands. China had a very different plan in mind. The J-20 Mighty Dragon reached PLAAF service on the 9th of March 2017, 12 years after the Raptor, built around a completely different philosophy. Where the F-22 was shaped to dominate a dogfight, the J-20 was shaped to strike first and vanish, long and slender, with distinctive canards up front and an estimated combat radius near 1,200 kilometers, almost double the Raptor's reach. Its newer WS-15 engines, fitted from 2023 onward, reportedly let it supercruise as well, closing the one gap that used to separate it from its American rival. It carries the long-range PL-15 missile internally, a weapon Western analysts once badly underestimated. By 2026, estimates put the Chinese fleet somewhere between 250 and 300 aircraft, with Chengdu's production line still running at full speed. That gap in raw numbers is exactly the kind of detail that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. When the first blurry photographs of the J-20 leaked online back in 2011, plenty of Western analysts assumed it was years from flying at all, let alone entering full squadron service. Numbers, though, only ever tell half the story. The F-35 Lightning II was never built to be the fastest thing in the sky. Its top speed is a modest Mach 1.6. It was built to see everything before anyone sees it coming. Its distributed aperture system stitches together a full 360-degree view around the cockpit, feeding the pilot a stream of data no fighter of its generation can match, and its helmet-mounted display effectively lets the pilot look straight through the floor of the jet. Entering U.S. Air Force service in August 2016, after a development program so expensive it became a punchline in its own right, the F-35 has already flown real combat missions over the Middle East since 2018, a combat record no rival stealth jet on this list can claim. Built in 3 versions, a conventional land-based model, a short takeoff variant for the Marines, and a carrier version for the Navy, Its global fleet today passes 1,100 aircraft across 19 countries, the largest fifth-generation fighter family the world has ever produced. More F-35s now roll off the Fort Worth production line every year than any single squadron of any rival stealth jet anywhere on Earth. This one quietly changed the economics of air power. China's answer arrived almost a decade later, and it walked a different path entirely. The J-35 only entered PLA service on the 3rd of September 2025, unveiled publicly for the first time at that year's Victory Day parade. Built from the Shenyang FC-31 demonstrator, first flown back in October 2012, the J-35 was designed from its very first sketch to operate off-aircraft carriers, making it China's direct counterpart to the American F-35C, though unlike its American rival, it flies on 2 engines rather than 1. As of late, 2025, at least 57 had already rolled off the line, split between a land-based version and a navalized variant. On paper, it is faster, an estimated Mach 1.8, but it carries no combat record at all, not one confirmed operational sortie anywhere. Its arrival gives China something the United States has had since 2015, 2 separate stealth fighters in frontline service at the same time. Chapter 2. Legacy Fighters, the Workhorses of the Sky. Few aircraft in history carry a story quite like the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Born out of a lightweight fighter program in the 1970s that almost nobody in the Pentagon initially wanted, it entered service in 1979, and 47 years later, it is still flying frontline missions in 25 countries, more than 2,000 airframes strong, making it the most widely produced Western fighter since the Vietnam era. Even its latest Block 70 and 72 versions still fly at Mach 2, proof that a genuinely good airframe never really goes out of style, it just gets a new radar every decade or so. Pilots still nickname it the Viper, a name that stuck harder than its official one ever did, and its bubble canopy remains one of the best all-round views from any cockpit ever built. China built its own version of that idea decades later. The J-10C entered PLAAF service in 2018, roughly 40 years after the F-16 it was meant to rival. Same core idea: a single engine, a delta wing paired with canards up front, a similar top speed near Mach 2, but it carries a domestic AESA radar that, according to multiple reports, gave Pakistan's Air Force a real edge during the 2025 air skirmishes with India. The first time a Chinese-built fighter and missile combination was tested against Western hardware in actual combat, and the results reportedly surprised more than a few Western defense analysts who had spent years assuming Chinese export hardware would always trail behind. That single skirmish changed how the whole world talked about it. Heavier jets, though, tell an entirely different story. The F-15EX Eagle II only reached initial operational capability in 2024, built as a modern successor to the aging F-15C, sharing the same basic airframe first designed back in 1972, but wrapped around an almost entirely new digital cockpit. It can carry 29,500 pounds of weapons, the heaviest payload of any American fighter flying today, and it can still touch Mach 2.5 when needed, making it the fastest fighter currently in the U.S. inventory. Yet fewer than 20 had been delivered by 2026 against a planned buy of 98 total aircraft, a slow rollout for a jet this capable. China fielded its own heavy fighter years earlier. The J-16 entered service back in 2015, derived from the old Su-30 and Su-27 lineage. And by 2026, the PLAAF and PLAN together operate more than 300 of them, one of China's most numerous strike fighters by far, flown by a crew of 2 and loaded for both air-to-air combat and long-range anti-ship strikes with the supersonic YJ-12 missile. A dedicated electronic warfare version, the J-16D, first spotted publicly in 2018, now flies alongside stealth jets to jam enemy radar before the shooting even starts. easily recognizable by the odd yellow-tinted radome fitted to its nose. Now, take that same rivalry out to sea. The F-A-18E F Super Hornet has been the backbone of American carrier aviation since 1999. Around 550 still serve today, armed with the combat-proven AN/APG-79 radar, a system that has been flying and fighting for more than 2 decades without losing its edge. And every U.S. Navy carrier deployment worldwide still depends on it, even as the newer F-35C slowly joins the same flight decks alongside it. China's carrier fighter carries a rougher pedigree. The J-15 entered Chinese carrier service in 2013 aboard the Liaoning, China's very first aircraft carrier. Itself, a refurbished Soviet hull bought second-hand and finished domestically, and the J-15 descends from the old Soviet Su-33 design. It is heavier and faster than the Super Hornet, capable of Mach 2.4, but its ski jump launches historically limited how much fuel and weaponry it could actually carry into the air. That changed in 2025, when a new catapult-launched version, the J-15T, began flying from the Fujian, China's newest and most advanced carrier, finally free of that old weight penalty. Chapter 3. Attack and Eyes. The aircraft nobody notices. Some aircraft are built for speed, others are built purely for survival. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, nicknamed the Warthog almost from the day it was born, is the second kind. Entering service in 1977, it was built entirely around a single weapon, the GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm cannon so enormous it practically defines the shape of the airframe wrapped around it. Its recoil alone is nearly equal to the thrust of one of the aircraft's own engines. It flies slow, barely 420 miles an hour, deliberately, because slow means accurate at low altitude, and its titanium bathtub cockpit can absorb hits that would down almost anything else flying. Around 160 remain in the U.S. fleet today, though the Air Force has been trying to retire the type for years, only to be overruled again and again, first by Congress, and later by ground troops who simply refused to let go of the aircraft that had saved so many of them. China once built something similar, then quietly let it fade away. The Q-5 entered Chinese service in 1970, developed from the earlier MiG-19 design and China's very first domestically produced attack jet, meant for exactly the same low-level role. It found export customers in Pakistan and Bangladesh over the decades, but by the mid-2020s it was almost entirely gone from frontline Chinese units, replaced by faster, multi-role aircraft that could do its job and several others besides. It never received the kind of precision-guided upgrades that kept the American design relevant for so long. Few people remember this one at all anymore. Eyes in the sky, though, matter just as much as guns. The E-3 Sentry, better known by its acronym AWACS, has watched the skies for the U.S. Air Force since 1977. Its rotating radar dome, capable of tracking targets up to 250 miles away and coordinating dozens of friendly aircraft at once. But the airframe underneath is a Boeing 707. Some of these jets are now over 45 years old, and the fleet has shrunk to around 16 aircraft, as the newer E-7 Wedgetail slowly takes over the mission. A transition that has taken far longer and cost far more than anyone in the Pentagon originally hoped. China's version is younger and quietly different in design. The KJ-500 entered PLAAF service in 2015, built on the sturdy Y-9 transport airframe. Instead of a spinning dome, it uses a fixed AESA radar disk that scans electronically with no moving parts at all, and it claims a detection range near 300 miles. China now operates more than 30 of them, nearly double the shrinking American fleet, a rare category where raw numbers already favor Beijing outright, built at a pace the aging American fleet simply cannot match anymore. Chapter 4. Bombers, Reaching Across Oceans. The B-52 Stratofortress, nicknamed the BUFF by generations of crews, first flew in 1955. And against all logic, it is scheduled to keep flying past 2050 after a full re-engining program known as the B-52J that will swap out engines dating back to the Kennedy administration. Its range is staggering, nearly 8,800 miles without refueling, and it can carry 70,000 pounds of ordnance across 8 underwing and internal stations, more than 3 times what the brand-new F-15EX carries. 76 of them remain in active service, flying missions their original pilots' grandchildren now command, older by decades than most of the crews aboard them. It flew over Vietnam during Operation Linebacker. It flew over Iraq in 1991, and again in 2003. And current plans have it still flying combat missions in the 2050s. A service life longer than almost any aircraft ever designed. China built its own long-range answer to it. The H-6K entered service in 2011, a deep modernization of an airframe that traces its roots all the way back to the 1950s Soviet Tu-16. Its range is far shorter, about 3,700 miles unrefueled. But it carries the CJ-20 cruise missile with a strike reach of roughly 1,200 miles, enough to threaten Guam without the bomber itself ever entering contested airspace. Around 230 of these bombers and their variants fly today across the PLAAF and PLAN, some still configured for a secondary nuclear delivery role, an aircraft lineage that has now outlived the country that originally designed it. One bomber on this entire list has never actually been seen. The H-20 is the aircraft China has been promising since 2016 and still, as of 2026, has not shown to the world. No confirmed flight, no official unveiling, nothing beyond leaked satellite images and a wind tunnel photo from 2022, plus one unrelated flying wing drone that some outlets mistakenly reported as the bomber itself. American intelligence assessments put its estimated range anywhere between 6,200 and 8,000 miles, but that range is largely guesswork, built on shadows and speculation. Even a senior U.S. Air Force general has publicly dismissed China's bomber force as, in his own words, regional at best. Chinese officials have been hinting the aircraft was almost ready to unveil since as far back as 2018, and every promised debut since then has simply come and gone without it. This one might not even exist in flyable form yet. Stealth bombers, though, seem to age differently than fighters do. The B-2 Spirit has been flying since January 1997, and it remains the only operational flying-wing stealth bomber on the entire planet. It first went to war over Kosovo in 1999, and even in 2026 it can still carry 40,000 pounds of ordnance, including nuclear weapons, while staying essentially invisible to radar the whole way in, thanks to a radar-absorbent skin so delicate it requires climate-controlled hangars just to preserve it between flights. Only 19 remain, after the 2008 crash loss of one aircraft, and each surviving jet, worth well over $2 billion apiece, is treated less like a bomber and more like a piece of national infrastructure. Every single one still calls Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri home, and every mission it flies begins and ends there, sometimes covering half the globe in a single sortie. Chapter 5. The Next Generation, Machines Still in Shadow. The B-21 Raider first flew on the 10th of November 2023, and it is already changing how fast America can build a bomber using digital engineering tools that let Northrop Grumman skip the traditional prototype phase entirely. By 2026, at least 2 prototypes are flying test missions out of Edwards Air Force Base, with a second delivered in September 2025 and already conducting aerial refueling trials. In February 2026, the Air Force committed an extra $4.5 billion just to accelerate production, aiming to get the first operational aircraft to Ellsworth Air Force Base by 2027. Its open systems avionics are built to accept new sensors and new weapons for decades, without ever needing a full redesign of the airframe itself. part of what the Air Force calls a family of systems approach. Unlike the B-2, whose price tag ballooned past $2 billion a copy once the Cold War ended and orders were slashed, the B-21 was designed from the outset to be affordable enough to build in real numbers. With the Air Force eyeing well over 100 airframes eventually, China's answer to it is stranger than anyone expected. The J-36 first appeared publicly on the 26th of December 2024, and even now, nobody outside China is entirely sure what it actually is. It has 3 engines, not 2, an almost unheard-of layout for any fighter aircraft, with exhaust nozzles recessed into the top of the fuselage to reduce its infrared signature, and it is tailless, with an estimated maximum weight above 50 tons. Analysts still argue whether it is a fighter, an interceptor, or something closer to a regional bomber. Beijing, true to form, has released no official specifications whatsoever, only a 1-second cameo in a state propaganda film. This one keeps analysts guessing, on purpose it seems. Not every next-generation aircraft on this list carries a pilot at all. The GJ-11 Sharp Sword first appeared at China's 2019 National Day Parade, a stealthy flying wing drone clearly influenced by America's own X-47B demonstrator years earlier. By late 2025, it was shown flying in formation with a piloted J-20 and a J-16D jamming aircraft over Shigatse Air Base in Tibet, hinting at a future where drones and manned fighters hunt in packs together. A naval version, the GJ-21, has already been spotted on a Chinese amphibious ship fitted with a catapult bar and a tailhook, years ahead of any comparable American carrier-based strike drone. The U.S. Navy actually tested a very similar concept first, the X-47B, landing it on a carrier deck back in 2013, only to shelve the whole program a few years later. America is chasing the very same idea, just differently. General Atomics YFQ-42, nicknamed Dark Merlin, began flight testing on the 27th of August, 2025. It carries its weapons internally, built for survivability while flying alongside crewed fighters, and it quietly descends from an earlier secret drone program known as the XQ-67A. Built by a company already famous for the Predator and Reaper drones, its rival on the program takes the opposite approach entirely. Anduril's YFQ-44 Fury flew for the first time in October 2025, roughly half the size of an F-16, carrying its weapons externally and built to be cheap and fast to produce, somewhere between $25 and $30 million each, compared to $81 million for a single F-35. The Air Force eventually wants over 1,000 of these drones, split between the two competing designs, flying as expendable wingmen for its manned fighter fleet, a concept that would have sounded like science fiction to any pilot flying just 10 years ago. Chapter 6: Tankers. The aircraft that decide the range of a war. Nothing on this entire list is less glamorous, and almost nothing matters more than a tanker. The KC-135 Stratotanker, itself a military cousin of the old Boeing 707, entered service in 1957, and, astonishingly, around 376 of them are still flying in 2026. Nearly 70 years after they first rolled off the line, having refueled everything from Vietnam-era fighters to today's F-35s. Every fighter's true combat radius, every bomber's real reach, ultimately depends on an aircraft like this one, waiting quietly somewhere in the air above, largely unseen and rarely thanked. Some of the airframes still flying today refueled the same B-52s that were bombing Hanoi more than 50 years ago. A newer tanker joined that fleet in 2019. The KC-46 Pegasus entered service that year, after a development program plagued by camera and boom problems that delayed it for years, and it can transfer up to 121 tons of fuel in a single mission, more than any other American tanker in the sky. Together with the KC-135, the U.S. tanker fleet passes 600 aircraft total, roughly 3/4 of the entire world's active refueling force in one country's hands. This is the part of the story almost nobody talks about. China, by comparison, is only now catching up in this category. The YY-20A, also known as the Y-20U, nicknamed Chubby Girl by its own crews for its wide fuselage, entered service around December 2024, China's first truly indigenous tanker, carrying roughly 90 tons of fuel per mission on its newer WS-20 engines. But the entire Chinese tanker fleet numbers only around 35 aircraft. A mix of this new type, aging Russian Il-78s bought secondhand from Ukraine, and converted H-6 bombers pressed into a secondary role. Analysts expect that number to reach just 30 to 40 dedicated tankers by the early 2030s at best. In a fight fought across the vast distances of the Pacific, that single gap in reach might end up mattering more than any one fighter jet on this entire list.